let's make a life-size version of the Darkmoon Greatsword. My plan is to make an inner sword with lights around the edges, with an outer shell made of clear Worbla, and then a foam handle. I started with the inner sword, and I got all the way to installing the lights before realizing that I didn't like it and having to restart. It's made of 4 layers of 3mm EVA foam with a wooden dowel shaved down at the end for support. I cut off 1/2 inch of the top layer of foam all around the edges so that it could easily attach LED foam later. I plasti dipped the whole thing and then made a pocket for the battery that will power the lights. I found the thinnest battery I could to try to hide it easily, and then I did my best to camouflage it with paint and quick seal. Then the painting process began. I went through so many stages to get this to where I wanted it to be, and it took a lot of trial and error and thinking breaks. While deciding what to do, I glued on the LED foam and then also glued in the lights. I did my best to paint the inner sword exactly as it looks because the outer layer is basically like a sheet of glass, so the inside of the sword has to look very much like the outside of the sword. I painted these frost patterns with a navy blue and then white tips for details. After stippling the edges of the sword with white, I used glass paint for the outer sword to blend the EVA foam and the LED foam better together. I went over everything but the frost spikes. This is my first time using this Worbla, so I did a bunch of testing. I made a whole mold and thought that I had it all figured out, and then I got my Worbla irreparably stuck and had to restart. So I do not recommend attaching both sides of Worbla to a whole mold. Instead, I made a half mold and heated up each half of the blade individually over that mold. After making sure the halves line up perfectly, otherwise they will warp, I used a soldering iron to melt the edges together. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area so those danger fumes don't end up in your lungs. Also, yes, this took a really long time. After attaching the edges together, I used a soldering iron to texture the blade. Pretend this isn't the old inner sword, as I did remake it last minute in the project. Using a mixture of blue and black in the center and aqua and white on the edges, I painted with like a dabbing motion to try to get a bumpy ice texture. It took around 5 thin layers to build up the color and get good coverage. I found that painting in thick layers gave a muddy result. Then I started the handle, which ended up being 9 layers of 3mm EVA foam, plus 2 half layers. I cut a space for the blade and the support dowel out, and also made a little cutout for the wires for the light. For the last couple layers of foam, I made sure there was space to remove and recharge the battery. I used these magnetic snaps to make a removable back plate. And this is what it looks like before sanding and filling. To sand, I used my Dremel, which worked really well to make the handle all bumpy, uneven, and worn. I used Quick Seal to cover any cracks and then trimmed away any flyaway or uneven bits. For these string bits, I used some fake suede cord. Then onto Plasti Dip so I can paint. To add even more texture to the blade handle, I added a few layers of Mod Podge. I dry brushed the handle a blue-gray color, then a dark brown, and then a blue-gray again. And the very last step before sealing the sword was to cover it in fake frost, which I had to adjust several times by brushing it off and reapplying it. Oof, scary. Oh, okay. No, just go for it. Just go for it. At this point, I realized I needed a mounting plate because this giant blade is going to need support. I brainstormed forever and then landed on this simple design cut out of 3/4 inch plywood. Sanded it, and then stained it 3 times. As a finishing touch, I made the logo out of gold leaf.
We should get some coat action.